I'm feeling, thank goodness. Here's how he's done this postseason. Not great. 334 yards and a double-digit victory against the Chargers, but still turned the ball over twice. Against the Texans, he threw for 3 touchdowns, but again, coughed it up there. And against Denver, got the win. But it was like a snowstorm out there. And like, what are you supposed to do? It was like a scene from Elf, except everyone was, you know, a professional football player. It wasn't a snowball fight. Is he due for a monster game?
No. He doesn't really, as excellent as he was this year, there weren't many monster games. The game against Baltimore was the only 300-yard game of his entire career. And there's a Jets game. Like the Jets, he had 5 touchdowns.
That was a stat padding game.
I think I could throw for 1.
And so he had, you know, he was surgically efficient. And early in the year, surgically efficient plus incredibly explosive. Right. Late in the year, less explosive, still very efficient. And you can't really find a slice of football where Drake this season was bad. But there is a pretty clear, you know, demarcation between when he was excellent and when he was solid. And that is where who you were playing came into play. So Drake this year against playoff teams, including the playoff games, is one thing I want to show you, which is, again, the team record, very good. Team points per game, that's above league average. That's solid.
Team points per game. I mean, a lot of that is like we lit up the Panthers, though, right?
I mean, that's only 1 of 7 games. I mean, you played 7, you know, so no. But a night, you know, 8 total touchdowns in 7 games, 200 pass yards per game in 7 games, a 95 passer rating. That's not explosive. That's not a monster game. And then when you see where he did have his monster games, you guys played 6 games this year against teams that are drafting in the top 6. And those were the huge stat games. Now, the right-hand column, that is a level good enough to win on Sunday. Just to be clear, the right-hand column is everybody else.
The others, yeah.
Yeah, the 235 yards, you know, 1.5 touchdowns to 1 pick is essentially, or I'm sorry, 2 touchdowns to 1 pick, 102 rating. That's all really good, but that wouldn't be a monster game. And so I just think, and that is Brew without even factoring in, Seattle has an argument that it's the best defense they will have faced.
Yes.
And
do you think the Seattle defense is better than the Texans defense?
So here's the thing. I think it's different. I think the way they are successful is different. But that game that you love that he played against the Texans defense involved him completing 55% of his passes and less than 200 total yards and 3 turnovers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's genuinely amusing to observe our collective effort to intensely focus on statistics, to really bore down into the numbers. And look, I understand the impulse completely. When I first began creating content, my attitude was overwhelmingly, I want nothing to do with statistics. Absolutely nothing. I very quickly came to the realization, however, that you are inevitably going to have to depend on statistics more heavily, simply because, well, you can't just sit through game film together. I can't possibly show you 100 clips of Drake Maye, and even if I attempted to, it would inherently be cherry-picking, right? If I just selectively choose moments, because you can isolate outstanding plays from any quarterback under the sun. So, you turn to statistics, because they provide a broad, general overview. It represents a legitimate sample size, albeit a statistical one, that allows for some form of objective measurement. Drawing these kinds of analytical boundaries, these statistical lines in the sand, I believe they can occasionally be useful. Sometimes they can spark interesting discussions. But this is a tendency I've noticed over time. And someone like Nick is particularly fond of this approach. He engages in this constantly. He did this exact thing with Bo Nix last season, you know, posing questions like, how did Bo Nix perform against playoff caliber teams? He is always sketching these dividing lines, and sometimes they hold relevance and can offer insight. However, I feel that these statistical demarcations gain disproportionate emphasis when you aren't genuinely watching the games and when you lean too heavily on those numbers. If you're not actually viewing the contests, then the stats give you a foundational crutch to build a narrative upon. But if you are diligently observing these games, and this is precisely why I continually refer back to the Giants and the Jets matchups from the perspective of a top 6 draft pick, the statistics often miss the point. It is irrelevant how many touchdown passes he accumulated against the Jets, and I'm referring to the first Jets game, not the latter one, and the Giants. What mattered was the quality of his performance. It was the nature of the throws, the ability to evade pressure, the instinct to step up within the pocket. It was the caliber of play. That was the moment of clarity for me regarding Drake Maye. What elevates Drake Maye at this juncture is precisely his quality of play. It is his consistency. He delivers a football with such insane accuracy that when he does post these monumental performances, there are multiple pathways to achieving them beyond merely dominating an inferior opponent. Naturally, a truly monster game for a quarterback typically stems from one of two avenues. First, you are an extraordinarily gifted physical specimen. This is where we observe players like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, where you have a game and the narrative is, this player just rushed for 100 yards and added 3 rushing touchdowns, or something similar. It's about introducing a completely disruptive, insane dimension to your game that transcends traditional quarterbacking. Drake Maye possesses a degree of this, but not to the extent of what Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson consistently bring. The second avenue is when a performance is heavily schemed. Now, schemed can carry multiple connotations. When I frequently discuss a schemed throw, I mean it in the sense of a predetermined set play where everyone on the field understands the design. A screen pass, for instance. That's the intention. It's a called shot. It's distinct from a standard progression read. But then there's also the broader offensive scheme, where the entire game plan is constructed to attack specific weaknesses. We witnessed this all season long with the Los Angeles Rams. Matthew Stafford would have these enormous games, because that was fundamentally the objective of Sean McVay and the offensive design. Stafford was phenomenal, making unbelievable throws throughout that campaign. But it was very much a structured approach. We are targeting passing touchdowns. We are working Cooper Kupp in the red zone, and so forth. This is a methodology the Patriots simply do not prioritize. Across the course of their games, the Patriots are remarkably balanced. One could plausibly argue they are the most balanced team in the NFL this season. Consequently, a stat sheet monster game is inherently less available to Maye compared to what a Lamar Jackson or a Josh Allen might produce, because those teams require those superhuman outings in a manner that the Patriots, with Drake Maye, do not. The manner in which Drake Maye is more likely to register a monster game is against some of those lesser opponents, where he can simply unleash or where receivers are consistently open. Caleb Williams, for example, had a monstrous statistical game against the Dallas Cowboys last season, and it held zero significance for me. I caught considerable flack for this stance, because he was throwing to wide-open receivers the entire game, and in fact, missed a significant number of throws. It was a contest where he might have missed 7 or 8 passes, yet because the Cowboys were so deficient, he still piled up a mountain of yards and touchdowns. People exclaimed, "Look at this incredible performance." And my reaction was, meh. He hit wide-open targets. I expect any competent quarterback to do that. That's not particularly special. Conversely, Drake Maye could put up similar production, and I might consider it a spectacular game. Or he could be facing a terrible team, but if he isn't missing those wide-open receivers, if he's simply not errant on his throws, yes, he's hitting the open men, but he's also executing some unbelievable individual plays where I'm left thinking, wow, the way you avoided that pressure, sidestepped, and made a throw while falling away. Again, it boils down to quality of play. So, to me, that is the lens through which I evaluate him. Perhaps this perspective will evolve over the years as Drake Maye's game develops, but presently, I firmly believe Drake Maye's superpower is his quality of play. That, in my view, is what makes him distinctive. For Matthew Stafford, it's his arm talent. For Josh Allen, it's the reality that at any given moment, he is capable of literally any physical feat required. For Lamar Jackson, it's his transformative running ability. For Patrick Mahomes, it's arguably his capacity to execute at the highest level or to create off-script. Pick your preferred descriptor. I constantly attempt to discern what each quarterback's true, defining superpower is. For Brock Purdy, it is execution within the system. And again, this doesn't mandate being in the absolute upper tier, but each quarterback possesses a signature characteristic. For Jalen Hurts, it is truly ice in his veins, executing the offensive plan at the peak level of what his coaches demand. For me, with Drake Maye right now, it is quality of play. Therefore, the entire debate about being due for a monster game, or drawing a line between his production against bad teams versus good teams, is fundamentally about quality of play. He plays the game in the manner required of him. He delivers what the specific game situation asks. Have we genuinely witnessed him transform into full Superman mode against an elite team as we've seen from Mahomes, Allen, or Jackson? Not necessarily, because the opportunity hasn't fully presented itself yet, and he's only in his second year. Moreover, as physically gifted as Drake Maye is with his legs and mobility, that is not his primary superpower in the way it is for a Josh Allen. I recognize that mentioning Josh Allen in a Patriots context is always a double-edged sword, but I simply believe the trajectory will be somewhat different for Maye. If anything, I envision Drake Maye's version of a monster game mirroring what we observed from Jalen Hurts in both of his Super Bowl appearances, utilizing his legs at supremely strategic moments. It's not exclusively about chaotic scrambles and insane highlights, but about executing at the highest possible level, deploying mobility when necessary, and capitalizing on every single opportunity. Whenever a play breaks down and any semblance of a running lane appears, you make the defense pay. You absolutely make them pay. That, to me, constitutes more of a monster game for Drake Maye in his current context than a line reading 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 380 total yards. I simply believe there are different tiers, different frameworks for concluding what qualifies as a monster performance. Listen, this was a season featuring some authentic, undeniable monster games. Again, apologies for the repetition, but Josh Allen's 6-touchdown game, 3 passing, 3 rushing, is a prime example. We've witnessed that. Stafford has had huge games, one being against the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he threw to wide-open receivers incessantly and posted something absurd like 6 touchdowns. It was a function of the Jaguars being an unmitigated disaster. Therefore, I think we must be precise about what we mean by a monster game. How is said game unfolding? To me, a monster game carries greater weight when you are placing a tremendous burden directly on the quarterback's shoulders. This is why I was more impressed by Josh Allen's performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because so much responsibility was placed on him in critical moments. Conversely, when Matthew Stafford has a huge game against the Jaguars, virtually 0 burden was on his shoulders in that contest. I believe a massive burden was placed on Drake Maye's shoulders against the Buffalo Bills in their first matchup. While I don't recall his exact statistics offhand, and I'm certain they weren't eye-popping, to me that constituted more of a monster game. An immense amount of responsibility rested on Maye, particularly in crucial, must-have-it situations, and he answered. There was a specific moment where he appeared destined to be sacked and hammered, yet he managed to scramble free and complete a pass while falling down, I believe to Demario Douglas. That, for me, epitomizes a monster moment within a monster game, where the burden was squarely on his shoulders. Therefore, attempting to draw a simplistic line defining a monster game purely by touchdown to interception ratio, yards per attempt, or passing yards per game is, I believe, a misguided approach. I genuinely question whether Drake Maye will ever consistently produce those box scores that make you exclaim, "Oh my goodness, this is outrageous." I don't necessarily believe that is the blueprint or how his career is destined to unfold. We will undoubtedly see those games, and perhaps even seasons featuring them, but I don't perceive that as the Patriots' organizational philosophy for team construction or execution, to be frank. The only scenario where I see that becoming a frequent possibility is if, through the draft and other means, they assemble an absolutely stacked roster. It's akin to some of Tom Brady's most prolific seasons, where you'd think, well, you're absolutely overflowing with talent right now, and it's just pedal to the metal. When you have a quarterback of that caliber paired with a roster of that quality, it's just, it becomes straightforward, right? When you're throwing to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce or to Rob Gronkowski constantly, with a brilliant coach and quarterback tying it all together, of course the numbers will be gaudy. With Stafford this past season, he had Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp and Sean McVay. Of course, he's going to throw a multitude of touchdowns. He's a great quarterback, but of course, his statistics will be insane. It's low-hanging fruit for a player of his caliber. So, that is precisely my stance on Drake Maye at this moment. I initially thought we were heading into a completely different conversation about a potential shoulder injury, and I was prepared to demur, but the discussion was steered, which I appreciate, toward the question, is Drake May due for a monster game? And my reaction is that it's simply the wrong question to ask, although I appreciate being backed into that corner for the discussion. It always circles back to quality of play. Quality of play. But those are merely my perspectives. I am absolutely eager to hear yours. What are all of your thoughts on Drake May and the New England Patriots? Is he poised for a monster game? Did anything I articulated regarding monster games and quality of play resonate? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. So, whether you concur with me or vehemently disagree, let's engage in some discussions. Let's have some spirited debates. But ultimately, let's simply enjoy the conversation. Please consider subscribing. We are building a fantastic community here and would absolutely love for you to be a part of it. My goal is to foster something we all feel genuinely connected to, something we are excited to participate in. I believe we are well on our path to achieving that. Also, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It genuinely assists with visibility and the platform's algorithm. Thank you so very much.